we might make a start then, now that we've started recording. So just remember, we are recording the session with the idea that it's available for people. So we have a lot of people that want to be here and want to hear what these sessions are about. But it's just because of scheduling clashes can't be here. So we had a really invigorating session. The last session. It was absolutely fantastic. And so I'm really looking forward to talking about retrofits and renovations. So today we've got a range of homes from around our region, and some pretty different places as well. There's quite a diverse options here. I've got myself and Liz here hosting the session. We have Graham on the admin. So if you've got any questions, put them in the chat as we go along, but we might just get straight into it. So what I'll do is I'll ask each of those who we've got here today to maybe just introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their project for a few minutes, and maybe why they're here and that sort of thing. So we might start with Rhiannon and Andrew, if that's okay. Am I saying that name correctly, Rhiannon? Just on mute, unfortunately.
I was typing in the chat instead of talking into press the space bar in the chat. Sorry.
No worries.
Sorry, yes, Rhiannon is correct.
Cool. All right, that's a good start then. So can you just tell us a little bit about your place? Obviously, it's a pretty magnificent example and sort of pretty different to what I'll be talking about, that's for sure. So could you just tell us a little bit about your place?
Yeah, of course. So we're currently sitting in 10 Mackenzie Street in Bendigo. We purchased these buildings back in 2014. So we purchased number 10 and number 12 Mackenzie Street. They were one lot. So they were originally built back in 1877 by the Anglican Church as a schoolmaster's residence and a school. We understand that they never really functioned properly as an official school, but more like a Sunday school, kindergarten, a community hall, community space. And the master's residence housed lots of different people affiliated with the Anglican Church at the time. And when we purchased it, it was being used as office space and had been quite run down or neglected, I think, over numerous years. So that's a little summary.
Fantastic. Well, we look forward to hearing and learning a little bit more about that as we go along. So we should also have here John and Trish in the chat? Liz, I don't know if you've seen John and Trish. Yep. John and Trish, you'll be able to talk a little bit about your home briefly and just a bit of context.
We built our home 32 years ago. We placed it on a block so that it was north facing to benefit from the passive solar energy side of things in those days. And in more recent years, we've put solar panels on and then a battery on the house. And now we have an electric car and we have completely electrified the house. So got rid of all gas. Big achievement. We actually had the gas disconnected last year. Yep. So we have a heat pump for the hot water service, heat pump for the central heating, and it just all works really well.
Fantastic. I think there'll be a lot of people wanting to ask some questions about how that process was, because I know just from my experience in the community in the last few months, it's one of the big questions I get is how to get off gas. What does that look like? What are the ramifications? So I think that's certainly something people will be interested in. Thanks for that. And then we should also have Fiona and Ian with their home out in Epilogue. I was just wondering, yeah, I think I saw them before. Fiona and Ian, if you want to give a bit of an intro. Hopefully.
You're on mute, Fiona.
Okay. So we bought this place in 2006. It's a 20-acre property out not far from Lake Epilogue. And it was a 1940s house transported from Bendigo. We've done a lot of changes to the place that includes insulation, walls, floor, ceiling. We've got one of the what's the heating system?
Turbo heat.
Turbo heat. We have a turbo heat system because we found that the heating that we had available was very limited, and we can back that up actually with what are they?
Reverse cycle.
Yeah, reverse cycle air. We also, interestingly enough, I was just out there before, it's a U-shaped house. And so a few years ago, we needed to enclose it, which was great because we kept on getting southwesterlies, yes, southerly winds coming in and swirling around, and it was quite unpleasant. And the side effect of that has actually been that that area heats up really nicely during the day. So then we can open the doors on either side of it and get a bit of that hot air coming back into the house. What else have we done here?
Well, the solar
Yes.
panels and
So we've
battery
got-
backup.
6 kilowatts of solar.
Originally we put in a 1 kilowatt solar system, and that was in 2010. In 2018 we put in another 5 kilowatt with battery backup, 7.2 kilowatt hour battery.
I think we might have glossed over the added insulation in there, because we might need Ian to go into more detail, because we've already been talking about you.
Yes,
All these
we were listening.
All these new houses that, just say, put R2.5 in my walls and put R5 under my floor. It's a hell of a lot more difficult when you might describe what you did, Ian.
Well, I basically took all the weatherboards off, put bats in and put the weatherboards back on, but it was a very slow process because the weatherboards were very brittle. So we had to be extremely careful taking them off so they didn't split. And the underfloor, we only did that 2 years ago, but the underfloor was fun because it had about 1 metre at the most to have some space under there. So you're pushing the bats up with either your knees or your feet and trying to hold the tape and the stapler at the same time. So that took about 5 weekends. That was a horrible job.
And
To
then
say nothing of the spiders and all sorts
The
of.
spiders didn't bother me, but the ground was a bit rough under the house because the builders had when they moved the house out here, they obviously left all the rubble and stuff underneath, and it was a bit difficult.
And in the ceiling, originally it had just pumped wool insulation. So Ian's actually put bats all up there as well.
So did you just load over the existing insulation?
I had to re-rake the wall because it had blown away from the outside. So I re-raked that all flat again, and then I just put bats on top.
So everybody, I think that the general consensus is if you want to add insulation to your ceiling, just add over the top of what you've already got, unless it's in a really terrible state or, infested with bugs or whatever. You can get it vacuumed out, but that's quite an expensive process. We might ask Rhiannon and Andrew, did they retrofit any walls or ceilings with insulation, and how did you do it?
Yes, well, the buildings had originally had slate roofs, and I guess we thought we were pretty waterproof, but and slate lasts a long time. But we've since learned that slate roofs last about 120 years, and we were 140 years old with the buildings, so we were sort of living on borrowed slate time, we like to say. So we had to go down the path of reslating all the roofs, and we took that up. And when we had to do that, we also took the opportunity to insulate underneath the slates, particularly in the hall area that we're sitting in at the moment, the ceiling that you can see there. So the wooden ceiling, but in between that and the slate was just pure, obviously air. And we took the opportunity to make sure that we insulated in between that and putting the new slate tiles on, which has helped to retain the warmth inside, but still allows it to breathe. And with you can see the original venting system. Can you see that up there? Those triangles, can everyone see those? Yep. That was the original venting, releasing the hot air and ensuring that fresh air was coming in. So we've still got those in place, but we have sealed them up a little bit to ensure that we keep the heating and cooling costs to a minimum here. We did it in the house as well. So there was a little bit different. There's a bigger cavity in the ceiling between the slate and between obviously the actual plaster ceiling. So, but we have put thicker insulation there. We weren't able to go as thick as next door. But we've done that, and any new windows that we've created or had to replace, we've done that with the double glazing. So but the original ones are still, unfortunately, they're originally beautiful, but they're still a little bit thinner than the ones that we have nowadays.
I might sneak in with a question there, because this is actually one I had myself when I was watching your videos. Where did you source the slate, and how difficult was that? Well,
Yeah,
I think for the layman, that would be really interested, I think.
Yeah, well, we were very lucky to come across a gentleman by the name of Paul Munro. I don't know if anyone's used him with us, if they've got any slate roofs, but he's just a bit of a roofing genius. And so we got up on the roof once we realized that we obviously needed to replace the story goes, I was in the house when it leaked, and then we went, okay, well, we probably should just fix that leak, as you do when your house leaks. And then he says, well, I'm going to need it like a scissor lift, because the ceilings are, the bottoms ceilings are 4.2 meters high, and the top ceilings are 3.8. So we're already up over, 8 or 9 meters high. So to get into that, we needed a scissor lift. So he got the scissor lift out, got up to the roof, and he's just got one of the slates in his hand, and he goes, this is what's happening. And it just is pure dust. And we're like, all right, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly and get it done, because it's so very obviously costly to scaffold a property like that. And we wanted to make sure we got it watertight and had it, correctly insulated, while we're doing all the work that we possibly could whilst paying for that scaffolding. So he got up there, and we talked about, so what we had in place were Welsh slates, but the price for Welsh slates was something along the lines of, I think, $10 a slate. But Spanish slate looks identical to Welsh slate. And there wasn't a local option, as we understood. So he said, well, can we use Spanish? And I said, well, because we're a heritage overlay, we have to do like for like. So we got the heritage advisor involved, and she hopped up on the scaffolding and got up and was like, okay. She said, well, pretty much I can't tell the difference either. We're looking at both these slates, and we're like, well, if we could go with the Spanish at this point in time, we're still gonna have to import it. But, the fact that it's a lot cheaper would be a great help for our funding at this point in time. Absolutely. So we ended up with Spanish slate.
Oh, great. That's really, that was certainly something I was curious about. Yeah, because obviously you got the heritage overlay inside and out, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, which is, so even if we want to paint a wall here, we have to make sure that we go through the right channels to get that approved. So which just adds a layer of complexity when you're trying to renovate and restore an older building.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. So just sticking with the intros for a second. So I'm not sure if Gus has arrived, just so people are aware of.
Gus is juggling a baby at the moment, and the baby's going like, I'm not going to do this Zoom.
Well, that's fair enough then.
I'm just going to stand in for Gus and tell you a little bit about his house.
That'd be great.
When Gus made a comment on my efficient electric home, I sort of commented back, and he said, oh, I've got a house. And I said, where is it? And he said, oh, it's a round house. And I said, I know that house. Like, that house is awesome. So he came on board. There's a lot of issues with their house, but they're doing everything right. They're replacing all the internal walls, and by doing that, they're insulating. That means they can't always wrap, because they're doing it from inside rather than outside. They're also putting in heat pumps and split systems, but the main issue in their house is the windows. They have these gorgeous round windows, and they have 3 of them. Most Bendigo houses with a round extension or a curved extension, they only have 1, but he's got 3. So it's really hard to get the glass. You can't just go down the street and buy the glass. So he's managed to get some from the windscreen people. So yeah, there's a hell of a lot of difficulties with their house, but they're doing it justice by doing all the right things. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then I guess the last house we have is mine, or ours, that I'm sitting in right now, which is double brick cottage in Elmore. So we're definitely at the lower end of the the scale in terms of the outlay. It's definitely on a budget, and was bought on a budget with a lot of issues. So I guess for people's interests, we're focusing a lot on using recovered materials, recycled materials, however you want to call it, and also starting from a really low baseline in terms of energy efficiency. It's less leaky now, but it's still a pretty leaky and pretty uninsulated place. So yeah, for us, it's just been a mission of bringing it into a bit of modern comfort, and we've put on a solar system. Got gardens were basically just flat green, dead lawns all around. So we've really brought them back, and my partner in crime is actually outside working in the garden at the moment, too shy to be on camera. And so a lot of native planting and trying to make it a friendly garden for natives. That's what we're going for. But inside, trying to capture a lot of modern styling. So we've got a lot of exposed brick, and that's its own set of challenges and processes. So if anyone has any questions about that, I've learned a lot since doing it. So happy to provide some advice to people who might be looking to do that. That's fantastic. Okay then. Well, as I say, we've got quite a panel here and quite a range of builds and experiences. And please do, as we have in our previous sessions, just put your questions in the chat. We'll collate those and work our way through those as we go along. I thought we might perhaps go to John and Trish and talk a little bit about that sort of path to all electric, because I think that's really it's really in everyone's mind at the moment. So I, as part of the BSG, deliver a lot of solar sessions and energy efficiency sessions and things like that. And one of the things that I'm encountering is people really do want to get off gas and want to move to that more all electric home. So I was wondering if you could step us through that process, what it was like for you, John and Trish.
Well, we've got a shared position here, I think, John. This has taken place over a couple of years now. Just looking back, I think 2018, February, we first started with the solar. Whereas as Trish said earlier, the place is sited so that we utilise the sun as best we can, and also with the gardens so that we've got deciduous trees and the use of grapevines and that type of thing to help with heating and cooling. But once we went down the path of starting with the solar, that sort of clicked a few other buttons, and Trish in particular is an avid reader on all of these things, and Syl Griffith became
our idol.
Yes, household name down in here.
I call it, we've done us all.
That's good. I like that.
So it was about then looking at staging through. So it's the sort of thing that very rarely that you just do it in one foul swoop. But we had, as we were going forward, there was a number of appliances that were about to see their maker. The way the world goes these days, 10 years seems to put the ticker on most things. So we started then, as I say, first of all with the solar. So with that one, without putting ads in, we actually went via Kohler Solar, and they negotiated pretty hard with us, and equally backed them, and they were open to all of that. But we went with the sun power systems, so the German panels, originally on a 5.3 kilowatt system and Tesla battery, so a Powerwall 2 in the same hit. So that sort of started the process and probably exhausted the bank for a very short time. And while we got organised, then looking to go forward, well, what are we going to do next? And
because we were putting a lot of power back into the grid, and what we wanted to do was to use that, because it's much more efficient for us to use it somehow than putting it back into the grid.
And we had also 2 lines of billing. So like most of houses that were built in Victoria under the arrangement set by government years ago, we had gas appliances as well as electric. And the gas appliances that we had were gas central heating, and also hot water and hot plates. So the more reading you do, and again, Saul and some of the other pundits were pointing out to us that not only is gas expensive, which is I'm telling you nothing there, it also has some other rather nasty health implications. The more we started to look at it, the more we started to think, well, really, we want out of this. So we then started looking, okay, what's going to come up next? When we were starting to parallel the bills, and the gas central heating was substantial. So we thought, okay, let's have a look and see what we can do about managing that one. And we're also, there's this thing in the back of your mind, I don't know about the rest of you, but thumping great big flames licking around in the ceiling, driving these things, it did play in the back of my mind. We did have a gas wall furnace some years ago that when we removed it, we discovered that it had been starting to burn inside. And that puts the fear of God into you, I can tell you. Anyway, that was removed, and we replaced that. We did a fair bit of research on this, again with another local supplier, but went in with a large Actron heat pump. So it literally replaced the central heating and also provided an auxiliary cooling aspect if required. So most of our cooling has been with evaporative, but now we've got both options. And it's a particularly efficient piece of gear. So that was another electric tick that we went through. And then not long after that, we were looking at a somewhat bubbling hot water system. So again, we thought, well, we're not going down with the gas line. Jumped that out and went for the heat pump as well. So they put a 317 litre Rinnai heat pump onto the house, which they're remarkably efficient. Really, really good the way they operate. And all we were left with at that stage then was the gas hot plates. So for the use of those hot plates, we were also then encumbered by $1 a day gas charge.
Service
fees. So you're looking at $300 or $400 to boil a couple of peas, and it starts to get a bit silly. So that was interesting. We actually contacted our provider and said, we want to remove this because that was the last of our purchases, was to go in with a fully electric range. It seemed like an easy thing to do. What we had to do was get a signed document from the gas fitter that it had been shut off. And then from there, we went back through the provider, which at the time was Red Energy, I think, and requested that they then lodge that application to have the gas shut off. Now that happened fairly early in the year, but we noticed about 2 or 3 months later, we're still getting these bills, and they're still $1 a day, even though we had no gas. It was all disconnected at the house point. So we got back onto them and discovered that there'd been a change in the Act, that in the time between them lodging our application and it being rubber stamped, they changed the Act when suddenly from this is going to be removed by not the provider, not the gas. I'm trying to think their name there. It's Red Energy or the billing agency, but the actual provider of the system. It was going to be free. Then all of a sudden they came back to us and said, oh, no, they've changed the rules now. It'll be $1,000 and have to disconnect it at the street level. This starts to get a bit stupid. So we had some discussion with them and drove it back to the point where it didn't cost us. But I think that might be something to be aware of
Definitely.
And be prepared to take a fight up to them.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a common issue with going off gas. Yep, there's a lot of people battling companies who seem to want to charge a lot of money for cutting a gas pipe off.
Exactly. In the end, the meter was gone and the pipe had been sealed, but they decided that it was of huge concern to the populace at large that the pipe still actually came from the street to the house. So they come along, I believe, under cover of darkness, because I never saw the biggest, apart from a hole later on. But they removed that, and we didn't have to pay. But it was, I I'm not too sure whether it's good management or good luck in that particular instance, but I think I'd just be prepared to take the fight up to the provider. Anyway, it's gone now, and we have happily waved it goodbye, and everything's electric.
Fantastic. And I think, it's great to hear that journey and what that involves. And as you've sort of observed, it's just stage by stage. And one of the things, you obviously have the electric car as well. How does that sort of factor into your overall system, I suppose? Was that always the plan, or is that sort of a natural progression, or?
Cool.
Yeah, we needed to replace one of the cars, and we just thought, well, why would you in this day and age get a fossil fuel car? It just didn't make sense to us. And the fact that we had quite a lot of surplus power going back into the grid. So we looked at the economics of it and thought, well, we're going to be saving quite a lot on fuel by buying it. And we've already got a lot of the energy, so let's bite the bullet. And also we really wanted to see how it would work, I guess. And we've just found that, especially having a Tesla and the Tesla battery, we have an app on our phones that we can just look at either or and see how much excess power we've got. So then we often put the car on to charge in the afternoon when we're not using very much power at all. And the other week when we had that shocking weather, Tesla sent us a message and said, looking at the weather forecast, there may be an outage in your area. So we're going to fill the battery from the grid, because it had been overcast for quite a few days, so we had no power in the battery. So they put it on 48 hours and they just kept the battery full, so that if we lost power, we would have had sufficient to do basic. We would have turned the heating off if it had been an outage, and we would have not used a washing machine or a dryer, or we would have really minimized the amount of power that we were using, but then we would have had power. And when we've lost power before, we put the message out to the neighbours, well, if anyone needs to come in and cook a meal or whatever, please come in and use our power. So
that's great. So there's a bit of sort of smart technology aspect to it, and yeah, I think that's really when you told me that the other day, and I was thinking, oh, that's pretty cool. I quite like that. Yeah, it's a good feature.
There's a few questions coming in while you're talking about such things. One is about why you went for a heat pump instead of a solar hot water, and the second one is about what hot plates you replaced the gas hot plates with.
I'll go the stove. We had a range, a standalone range, so I do a lot of cooking. So we went with a SMEG range and an induction cooktop. And the induction cooktop is amazing. It's so fast. I can boil a small pot of water in a minute and a half. It's so efficient. So you're not using very much power.
The heat pump, that interesting question. That we did have a look at both of those systems and made the decision to go with the heat pump because it was just going to be a single changeover. If we went with solar, we'd still need to have the existing gas position, and we wanted to get away from gas totally. So when we added those things up here, we thought, well, the heat pump will assist with the efficiency that we were looking for. And in this part of the world, you actually get enough variation in it in ambient temperature, so it works really, really well. Even on the coldest nights, it's the hot water is never ever a problem. So it works well. But I was also just wanted to harken back a little bit on to the vehicle. When we purchased that, we're relatively early adopters because we've had it now for 2.5 years, and it was a suck it and see thing. It was well, here's an opportunity. We'll give it a go, and we've learnt a lot. So the vehicle we bought has got a realistic operational range of about 500 k's, and that's at driving it with no regard. So 110 acceleration, all that sort of thing. So it's a very usable distance to Melbourne and back if you require without any concerns. Although we generally do top up just to make sure that there's always plenty for side trips or whatever might take place. But we've also learned a couple of other things, just the way they drive, you know, without anything else, and all of the wonders of electricity, they're an absolute bucket load of fun to drive. It's different to anything else that you'll ever come across. So there's a real plus for that. But we've also, you look at the thing, there's no servicing. Yeah, that was in Harmony, that one. So literally no servicing. But as part of it, and this is really one of Trish's areas in all of this, that as I said earlier, that Saul's a touch of a devotee, but we also use the car just by chance as an educational tool. The number of people that sort of look at them and are confused by the car that we'll take for a drive or give them a bit of an understanding and spin around the place. And it's amazing how a lot of the views that people have on electric cars change very, very rapidly when they get a chance to go out and have a bit of a buzz around.
The other thing we noticed too, when we first started changing the house over, I would talk to the tradesmen that came into the house, and they thought we were lunatics to start with, that we'd ever go all electric. But over the years that we've been making the change, by the time they came in to do the stove, which was the last thing we did, they were going, oh yeah, this works really well, doesn't it? So it's really interesting to see how that mindset has changed in that 5 years.
Yeah, it's people like you who are leading the change. So yeah, it's great to have you on board. I think speaking on Gus's behalf with his home, he is also going all electric. So he's installing split systems, a heat pump for the hot water, and just insulating everything he can. And a unique feature of the round walls is he's using heavy curtains because he can't change the windows. So he's using really heavy curtains, and he's got the plasterer to make a sort of pop down pelmet that drops down, and the curtain goes between the pelmet and the walls so that it sort of seals really well. So these are other alternative things you can do that are good retrofit items. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think there was a little bit of crossover with some of the things Fiona and Ian have done at their house there, I see in the comments. So Fiona and Ian, I was wondering if you talk a little bit about, you know, I suppose we're talking about some of our major appliances here, our heating and our cooling, our cooking, our hot water system. You've touched on those a little bit. Maybe we can have a bit of a crossover. So, you know, it's 1940s home. It's been relocated. You talked about the insulation rather. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on some of your decisions around heating, cooling, etc.?
So the turbo heat was basically, we were one of the early people who adopted his system. He originally lived in Bendigo, and that was largely because our split system at the time broke down in the middle of winter one year, and so we were stuck with a little oil-filled heater for 5 weeks while they tried to fix the problem. And we just knew that that wasn't going to work. I guess the problem you have with an older style house is that you can do a lot of changes, but still at the end of the day, it's not a new build, and it, you know, is not as economical as other places would be. And so we did need the heating system. It's quite a large house. And that makes a huge difference because then we have choices. So if we've been out during the day and we want to come home and the place is cool, we'll just put one split system on in one room, and that's enough to keep it comfortable. But if we're going to be here for a number of days and it's really, really cold, then we can use the turbo heat. And there's a little bit of juggling with the turbo heat. It's not perfect, but
so if I just pause you for a second, for those who don't know, so a turbo heat's a wood-fired heater. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And what's the sort of, what makes it a turbo heat as opposed to just another wood fire heater?
Oh, you can do it.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, put us on the spot here.
Yeah.
Turbo heat has a jacket around the flue. So it basically captures all the energy that would normally go up the floor and then pipes it through to the ducting in the roof of the house and distributes it to all the other rooms. Ours was a really early one, so it's not zoned, so it's all or nothing. And you cannot close the door where in the room where the wood fire is. We made that mistake once and we ended up with a house full of smoke.
All right, there we go.
Just,
Okay.
just because the sucking the air down through the turbo heat box instead of it going upwards. So we only made that mistake once.
So
But,
as a form of central heating, though, which it kind of is.
yeah, it is. It's brilliant. It actually works really, really well.
Hmm.
It takes the I mean, the rooms aren't super hot, but it takes the chill off the air and just makes it livable. I think we said to you, Liz, when you were interviewing us, the house was like an icebox in winter, with just weatherboard, no insulation. It was just horrible. And with the turbo heat, it is livable. The only thing I've got is I have to go and cut firewood.
But the interesting thing was that Scott mentioned it, the builder who's building brand new passive and eco houses. He mentioned that, you know, his houses are putting them in. So yeah, there you go. It's still efficient is what I'm saying, I guess. Yeah, you've chosen a good method, it sounds like.
We've had ours in 11 years now, I think, and we haven't had any issues at all with it.
That's fantastic.
You know, it speaks volumes to its quality.
That's right.
We might have different issues with Rhiannon and Andrew because they've got huge ceilings to keep warm.
Yes.
And lots of people having fun in there and, you know, warming up the space. But yeah, you need something extra. So how are you going for heating and cooling at Mackenzie Quarters?
I don't know what system it is.
We're just trying to recall which system we put in. That's terrible, isn't it?
I think you've got a lot on there. I think I would forgive you for that one, I think.
But I can say it is amazingly, we did look at two different options. One was to vent through the ceiling, which you see we've kept clear. So originally it was to run the pipes and then have the air coming in. And we actually opted not to do that, but to instead put in, I'm going to turn this around so you can see that system there. So you can see that.
Okay, we can see some vents.
You can see some vents. Yeah.
It's effectively a split system.
So it's a split system that heats this one particular. So it's all stored in that, where those vents are, it's all stored in that.
Wow, it's giant.
And that services this room. And we put an evaporative cooling system in the kitchen, which services just the kitchen, and a split system which services one of which I've just put in. There were some benefits from the government that I got a little kickback there, but I just put it in one of the little side rooms, the bar area, because we couldn't get through because the walls are so thick here. Sort of double brick. Actually, we were just talking about this before, but we were to mention it. Is that did you want to read that? We digress, but when it was originally built, these buildings, it was actually advertised in the Bendigo Advertiser as a competition. And so architects were able to apply to that competition, and the successful architect that built this or that designed this was Frederick White, and it was agreed it was to be of brick, to contain not less than 10 rooms exclusive of kitchen and scullery, to be 2 stories high, and this is in particular the master's residence, ecclesiastical in style, but with a due regard to the requirements of climate.
Wow.
And cost not exceed £1,600. So I think back then it was acknowledged that obviously Bendigo's climate could be quite challenging, obviously very cold in winter and very warm in summer. And the building was designed with being double brick cavity and then another double brick. So it's probably one of the earliest examples, not the earliest, I say that, but one of that cavity style building, which obviously is really efficient, I guess thermally efficient and able to retain and extract the heat and cooling as required. So it was quite I guess, modern for its time back then. It was designed in 1883, I think that, no, 1873 was the competition. And then in 1877 was when it was finished, the build was finished. So when we did the, I guess, the restoration, we really did think, how can we heat and cool this building efficiently? What was being utilised was pretty much a Canara heater for this entire space, which was particularly, it was warm if you were standing next to it, but it didn't really extend out past
You're
it.
asking a lot, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so by putting in the split system, or the system that can heat and cool, we find that we sit, once people are in here, you're right, the thermal mass of people in here keeps it pretty warm in winter. So we don't actually have to use a lot of heating. We can heat to a point, and then the bodies in the room keep the heat going. So it's quite efficient in that sense. Summer, really the heat of summer, the problems we do have with that are when we hit those continuous 40-degree days, because the bricks heat up so much at that point. So, and we do need to have a few cool days to cool it down. But again, being on a hill as well, I think it was well designed in that we can open up our windows and our doors, and the cool air can come through, and we have that cool change, and it does cool down quite quickly in, for the size that it is. So we are lucky it has been
all of that.
Yeah. So in the space, the windows that we have, I'm going to turn you around here, but these windows here, these ones we did retro, they were originally like a safety glass, and we've retrofitted those with their double glazed windows, which have helped considerably, I think, to maintain the heat in winter inside and the cooling in summer. And then these windows down here, we've converted to doors. You can see those as well. And those ones, we double glazed all of those. There's a lot of steel, I will say, that went into reinforcing those areas to be able to support the weight of double glazing. And that's probably the biggest challenge in an old building, is just ensuring that you can support the weight of the double glazed windows. It's like, yeah. So
that's good, yeah, because that's sort of something I wanted to ask about, especially when the windows are prominently there. And we have had a question in the chat about retrofitting double glazed windows, and this is something that I encounter a lot. People asking me about as well, and who do you recommend? What do we, etc. And it certainly would have added a lot of cost, I imagine, doing that.
But worth it, I think, because you do keep your heat. You're not spending a fortune to heat and cool this place. And it does, like I said, it does heat up quickly, and it will stay that consistent temperature. And we're really lucky with Miss Batterhand's downstairs, the restaurant, that pretty much, it was built as a cellar. So cellars maintain a really consistent temperature of about, I think it was about 18, 19, 20 degrees. And so we don't, again, depending on how many bodies are in there, we do have to heat and cool it, but otherwise it pretty much, you can walk in there and it's consistently the same temperature all year round.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to getting down there and checking that out, actually. Liz, I don't know, with Gus, I have watched his video, but I don't recall, in terms of windows, obviously the thing that stands out are the curved windows. Do you know if he was looking at anything along those lines?
No, that's why he's put these elaborate pelmets in. So he's sort of basically sealed off between the window and the room using the really heavy drapes, which extend right out past where the windows are. And they also can go from both sides. So he can draw them from one side, depending on the afternoon sun and the morning sun. He can direct a lot of heat and light using the curtains and the pelmets. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think he's highly insulating the walls where he can, and some of the not the rear walls, the external walls need adapting from that side. So he's had to pull off boards on that side and insulate. But in that respect, it's not so bad, because he can also put the breathable wrap in, which helps too. I was interested, Ian, when you pulled the weatherboards off, did you put a breathable wrap back on with the insulation?
So your sound's not, you're on mute, I
You're
think.
mute, yes.
And Ian.
So go again.
Oh, is that?
Yep.
Down that? No, I just put the bats in and just put the weatherboards back over them, because that's how I found the building.
Yeah.
That's how,
Yep.
there was no foil or anything on there when I took the weatherboards off.
So I presume that you guys are pretty comfortable now, though.
Reasonably, yeah, that has definitely made a difference to the.
And have you addressed drafts and air leakage? So I think one thing we could do for all our retro participants is lend them our thermal camera. Even for Mackenzie Quarters, it's quite fun. You can, BSG members and Sustainable House Day participants can borrow it, and you can go around shining it on all your walls and windows and find out where the cold or hot spots are.
Well, the doors are sealed. Unfortunately, we've got a house full of sash windows and they leak.
That's my challenge as well.
I'm not really prepared at this stage to spend the money on the windows.
It's a lot of money, a lot of money. Yeah, yep. I see you've got pelmets.
Yes, we have pelmets.
Yes, they're like a plaster pelmet that was in when we came here. So that's brilliant because, you know, that's what they say you should be doing.
Actually, that was an issue. We did get somebody out to talk about the windows, and he took one look at the pelmets. He said they'll have to go.
Oh.
So that was the end of that discussion. Because the pelmets were not going.
Okay, well, someone's actually asked a Windows question in the chat about magnetite, and
That's what we used.
Well, yeah, we have had a mud brick house use magnetite 1 or 2 years ago, and they found it very good. So, yeah, one of our sustainable householders has used them, and they like them. So that's retrofitting double glazing. So they add an extra layer in. I'm not sure whether it's a perspex sort of layer, and they hold it on with magnets, which is kind of good because you can take them off again and clean windows and things.
It is a perspex type of fitting.
So just building on that, you know, Steve's comments about pelmets and things like that, and I think one of the attractions to retrofitting and renovating is doing things on a budget. So I think that one thing worth mentioning is that, yeah, when you do look at the statistics around the studies, yeah, if you get pelmets and heavy drapes, you can probably get the same effect as you would with double glazing. A good resource, I'll try and find it at some point and put it in the chat, is the Sustainability Victoria Sustainable Building Guide. So it has a lot of insights into things around windows. Some really great stats there that you look, if you're using pelmets and heavy drapes, look, that's not always going to work aesthetically, of course. It depends what you're looking, the effect you're looking to achieve and the context, but you can get a lot out of that in terms of some efficiencies. So yeah. Okay, so we talked a little bit about windows, and yeah, look, just quickly at my place, yeah, that's the sash windows are the real challenge. They're very, very, very difficult to make them be super efficient yet still functional. So yeah, it's a real challenge. It really is. I can certainly commiserate with that.
But, you know, there's the option 2 of the honeycomb blinds, which we mentioned in the last session. They're relatively economical, depending on which version you choose. And yeah, I've got them in my bedroom, just $60 ones from IKEA, and you can really notice the difference if I forget to put them down at night.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, curtains are something that's really worthwhile investing in. But at Mackenzie Quarters, I guess you can't go too much in curtains. You've got long ones on the double glazed side, though.
Yeah, we do have long ones there, as you can see, but they're the ones we did double glaze. The ones behind me are the only ones that aren't double glazed in this venue now. So, but in the residence, we did go, they're all original windows, and we have gone heavy curtains on each of the rooms. And again, we're lucky that obviously the builders back in 1877 built it so well that with those curtains, they do block out a lot of that heat in summer. And again, the cold in winter, they retain the warmth inside. So, you know, we're super, yeah, we did spend a lot of money on curtains to ensure that we did that and to do it just, I mean, there's a lot of floor to sort of ceiling curtain type situations going on. So it's really making sure it traps all of that air that would escape otherwise. So.
And those ones behind you are just really too beautiful to cover up.
Yeah, well, this is true. I was wondering about this light, whether it's distracting. It's quite bright today. For the
No,
first
no.
time, it's not raining.
Yes, I know. Well, don't worry, we're going gardening next session.
Yeah, oh, good. All that lush green.
Well, yeah, you know, think pineapples, pawpaws. Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Can
yeah.
there was a question earlier which you responded to about slabs, but I reread the question, Liz, and it's they're going upwards. They're going to be extending upwards and are debating the question of whether to put in a suspended slab, which they can do, versus wooden floors upstairs. And maybe John, as the builder in our presence and given our conversations in the last sessions, you might want to comment on that.
I must admit, right then I was putting something in the chat, Graham, so I missed that question. I'll just be honest.
The question is about the people who put it in. I've flicked down past it again, but have putting in an extension, a second level extension, and the question was whether to use a suspended concrete slab for the second level to gain thermal mass versus a wooden floor.
I guess my instinct there would be, look, I'm probably not enough of a building scientist to be able to say. It depends what, I mean, if you've got a lot of money, then I guess that if you've got a lot of, that's probably my first instinct for that is,
Also,
and I think at the end of the day, a strong building envelope and a well-built home that's, you know, being heated efficiently and used efficiently, and, you know, when solar in the mix and things like that would probably overcome the thermal mass. But that's just a layman, well, semi-layman, semi-informed opinion on that one.
Well, I think they could listen to our previous session, because we had quite a good discussion on slabs versus timber floor with insulation under the floor. So the passive house actually didn't have a slab. It had a timber floor with R5 bats under it. And Ian and Fiona come in there because Ian's crawled under the house and insulated the floor too. So it all depends, I think, on the insulation levels. It's a very technical question with engineers involved with weights of slabs and everything that I don't think we're qualified to answer, but we
I'd agree, but I just thought I'd put it in there as well.
Thanks.
Okay, do we have any more questions there, Graham, at the moment in terms of?
I don't think so. There's a few comments.
Well, we might let it percolate a little bit more then. Yeah. So just thinking of the homes we have here, I am interested, you know, we've talked a little bit about windows and window coverings, things like that. What about ceiling insulation? I think we've spoken about that a little bit at Mackenzie Quarters. We've touched on that. Yes, we have. That's fine.
There is another one just come in. We have an outdoor space that is built in with clear outdoor blinds and are looking for recommendations for efficient heating and cooling. I suspect that might need some very specific advice as well once you're having by someone who's going out there.
Yeah, I think with outside areas, you know, this is probably speaking a little bit generally now, but if you can factor in your trees and perhaps what you're growing in that area for some natural shade, I think it's always a bonus. You can even get really, have ones where this name escapes me, which just shows my ignorance, but where the leaves fall off in winter. So that's the one. I had a mind blank. So if you can sort of capture that natural shading and light penetration, I think that would be something I would be wanting to have in the mix there. Obviously, trees don't grow overnight, but
grapevines grow pretty quick.
Yeah, that's a good option as well. Actually, that's a great option.
Make them edible.
Yeah, that's huge bonus points. So that's probably
gardening. One of the gardening gurus coming in from the next session.
And building.
True.
That'd be great. I think I've just got a few more questions probably about Mackenzie Quarters. It's a little bit indulgent from my point of view. So in terms of I think we know because we've been working on this project, but so this is obviously a wedding venue. We've got the bar and restaurant. So you've got a lot of different motivations there. and you've also had all the heritage overlays. Did you find you had a lot of choice in what you could actually do? Did you find that, you know, you're dealing with those heritage overlays? Obviously, you've made some observations that they have some flexibility, but internally, did you have much choice about what you could and couldn't do, even from an energy efficiency or whether it's aesthetics, all sorts of stuff?
Like, it's a really interesting question. And actually, we're just about to embark on our next renovation project. I don't know why.
Wow.
But we are. And we're currently dealing with architects and builders. And it's really interesting attending this workshop, because I can tell you that no one has even said anything to us about, you know, well, what you know, how are we looking at renewable energy options here? And what about, you know, like those conversations, I think, are so important at such an early stage, and nobody's even flagged it. And so particularly with, I guess, restoring older buildings and thinking about that, it is so important to try and factor that in early on so that you can look at all the options and have choice around that. So I think here we were lucky. We did have to work with what we had, didn't we? It was really, there wasn't a lot of choice in changing anything, and anything that we did change, we really, it is quite a lengthy process to have to go back through council to get that approval. But we were just really clear that we wanted to make sure that any new element that we were putting in, we were making sure that that met, you know, the standards, or, you know, hopefully future-proofed. Maybe, you know, I think they triple glaze now in Europe, but you know, if we could at least double glazing with anything that we were doing, that we could then ensure that we were doing the right thing by the building, but also to continue, I guess, to reduce any costs that we're going to incur with heating and cooling.
And perhaps it's not a matter of compromises, but it's a matter of doing what you can do. For instance, I mean, you can't put solar panels on slate roofs in a front-facing heritage overlay, but you can put it, you know, within the gullies of the building, and that's, whilst you know, we were able to manage that. We've also managed to put the, you know, solar in areas where there's not a visual impact. And again, you know, other ways in which you can explore, you know, improvements. So our food waste, rather than going into, you know, just a standard composting system, is all dealt with on site.
Wow.
So it's a process or a machine called the Enrich system.
We call him Richie for short.
That's good. I love that.
They are fantastic.
Yeah. So
I'm envious.
Well, you know what the great news is, if anyone wants any soil for their garden, that we can give it to them because we have it out here. So basically it takes all our food waste. And that was our biggest thing. We said, you know, we wanted to restore an old building. We didn't want to build something new. And if we were to, you know, to restore and then give life to this building for, you know, years to come. So, you know, we understand we're custodians of this building now, but we would love this to live on for generations. So how can we do that and do it really well and preserve it so that others can enjoy it down the track? And I guess also with our operating a business out of here, how can we minimize the amount of waste that we put into landfill as well? So that was, so
we have some of our suppliers now who take some of the composted soil or the processed food waste, which effectively turns it within 24 hours. How many hours is the process?
Yeah, we run it overnight. So all the food waste comes off the, you know, any of the prep waste, mostly basically goes into this machine, and it really dehydrates it. So, and it actually comes out, I call it smells like Christmas, comes out smelling like Christmas, because it's got quite a sweet smell, but it's not offensive at all. It's quite nice. And then depending on what's gone in, coffee's gone in there, it obviously has a bit more of a coffee smell, but it comes out like actually looking like a brown soil type substance, and it's super amazing. It's thermal. If you put it in your garden, the amount of heat that it will generate for your garden is just phenomenal. Like one of our chefs put it on his garden and it got to 60 degrees in the ground. So it just, and the worms that just love it, and it's an amazing, and so it's so rich, you really need to sprinkle it. You can't dump it. You shouldn't have dumped it all in the one area. But you've got to sprinkle it through the garden, and so we like to give that back. So if anyone's interested, we've got heaps of it.
I'll be in.
Yeah,
I'm setting up wicking boxes. So
yes,
yeah,
bring your box, bring your bucket, and we'll shovel it in.
No, we had someone a few years ago with one of those, and he's just got a home one. Like it's just 6
Yeah.
port, He puts it on overnight and it produces beautiful compost in 24 hours.
Yeah, they're increasingly available.
I'll put it in the link
yeah.
so everyone can
great.
access Enrich 360. And we got some funding through the government at the time. It was the Victorian government, I think, was doing it.
Yeah,
but I think it should be compulsory for any businesses starting out to be able to minimise their waste going into landfill. It's just common sense. But anyway, hopefully that happens in the future. But anyway, yeah, in the meantime, everyone's welcome to our soil, and I'm going to put the link into the chat.
That's
Just
fantastic.
drop in, and
There
we'll
are a few more
bring you back.
questions there now.
Well, there's a chance to have a drink and get some soil.
Yeah, well, you can do that too. You can just come for the soil. It's fine.
You're going to have a queue out there Monday morning.
No, we're not open Monday. Come Wednesday.
Okay, there we go.
We have a weekend on Monday, Tuesday.
Graham, you mentioned
there's
questions we can look at.
lots of questions coming in. I'll start with the top one that I've last seen is heating that is best in larger open space and very open plan with high cathedral ceilings. Are there hydronic underfloor systems, are solar powered, etc.?
The hard one, because our last session was probably the best placed for those.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. So I guess I would, unless anyone has something they could say to that, it's the cathedral ceiling is always a challenge because firstly, from an insulation point of view, often, well, we're looking at a somewhat literal cathedral in one room there in one of the videos. The challenge, of course, is that roof cavity's just so small that you don't have a lot to work with. So your insulation's already a problem. And then obviously, the high ceilings. I think if a fan can be in the mix, where we can have some control over, obviously people should know that they have winter and summer settings on their fans, obviously to try and have that behavioral issue. That's one thing you can control. And then second, I'm obviously a big fan of heat pump heating, so split systems and things like that. But in terms of the technical, what you would need for that space, I can't speak to that unless anyone else feels confident to.
I'm not confident to, but I know that I don't know of any hydronic solar powered specific systems. People have adapted them and used recycled hydronic heaters. And I know that the salvage yard in Castlemaine's got a huge amount of hydronic heaters. You can have a go yourself. With cathedral ceilings, they're talking about trying to get the heat down. I mean, Dakin do make a system that doesn't go on the wall, that it goes on the floor. So you could look at that. So it's a split system still, but the base unit that heats is on the floor. So yeah, it's probably more of a question that Richard could have answered in the previous.
He would have been all over it.
Yes. There's some questions about roof insulation and putting bats on top of existing or not. And again, I know people who have sucked out the old stuff and put in new, but I also heard Fiona and Ian talk about redistributing the old stuff and putting bats straight on top. So it's a bit of a mix there, I'd suggest, unless anybody's got something they want to add in there.
If it's in reasonable condition, leave it there and add on top.
Yeah.
You can't have enough. I mean, you can't have too much, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's sort of a lot of factors at play. So one might be that, depending on what that original material might be, it might be so scattered and of poor quality that it is worth vacuuming about. But of course, that's a cost. Okay, so that's something you're going to have to incur to do that. So you're already starting at a negative before you even put your insulation on. So I think putting a layer over the top would probably be okay. I think that now we're actually seeing a lot, and this is mainly from my interactions with the My Efficient Electric Home Facebook group, is you see people actually doing 2 layers of bats even to get that stronger coverage. Because one of the things that at a basic level for insulation is having no gaps in the coverage. So that's your number one. So there's some pretty easy statistics to look up at how quickly it impacts your insulation. So if you might have a 5% of no coverage, that can heavily impact your, say, R rating. It might go from 5 to 1.5 if you've got a 5% gap in your coverage. So that's your number one, is looking to have that coverage. So
can I put my 2 bits in?
Yeah, sure.
If your insulation's only as good as how thick it is. Okay, so a lot of the insulation around Bendigo, because we're a high producer of sheepskins and the tanning, there was a business in Bendigo when I first moved here 30 years ago, which used to get all the offcuts from the sheepskins, put it through a buzz muncher and pump it into people's ceilings. And it was great. I actually put it in my own house when I first moved here, and it was about 600 mil thick, and it worked really well. But after about 5 or 6 years, it went down and down and down and down, and ended up about 50 mil. And it also gets a lot of dust and stuff on it. So now whenever I'm doing renovations and I find that in the houses, then I usually get the guys to come in, spout vac come in, they can vac it all out for you so it's dust free. And then you can either put a paper down first and then insulate with bats, if they're old ceilings with lining boards and that, so you don't have any dust coming through, so bring down the dust allergies. Yeah, but if it's just bats and they're not in bad condition, they're fairly clean, they just go straight over the top.
Yeah,
I wouldn't go over the top of that munched up sheepskin stuff.
Yeah, so that's some good insight. We do appreciate that, because I think just building on what you're saying is that, so you might go for the top range bats, you know, R6 or 7 or whatever.
R6s, yeah, if we can get them in there. But again, you know, if an R6 is 200 mil and you've only got 100 mil cavity, then you're not going to have an R6 bat in there.
That's correct.
It'll only be as R as the thickness of the bat.
Yeah. So there's 2 points that I'm trying to make. So one is that if you have a gap in the coverage, even if you've got your expensive bats, you're not capturing that full R value that you've paid for. That's right. In addition to that, if you compress those bats, aka crush them, push them, force them into gaps, they're not expanding it, and therefore they're not capturing that full R value that you've paid for as well. So insulation is not as simple as just sort of throwing it and crushing it in there. It has to be laid, you know, very accurately. So, and I appreciate that insight, Murray, about, so what was that company that vacs them out?
Well, the gutter vac guys actually get up and do it. I usually get Bendigo insulations to come and do my underfloor and roof insulations in my buildings that I do. But I think they just employ gutter vac, and they just put their big vac up in there and they bag it all up so it doesn't go anywhere. It's all bagged up and taken to the tip properly. So
that's fantastic. So for this session, we've got about another 5 or 6 minutes, because we'll have a 15-minute break before our final one. So just wondering, Graham, we might try and jet through a few questions if there's any.
I think we've caught up with them.
Before we go, can we cover, did Trish and John, did you add insulation in your ceiling? Did we cover that?
No, we put the wool insulation in when we built the house. And since then, whenever a tradesman gets up into the ceiling, we get them to check it, and they've been saying up till now, until I've been listening to all of you chatting, that it's adequate, that it's doing the job. So
okay. Well, there's lots of different kinds of wool insulation. There's not only the one that's munched up sheepskins only.
Well, the earth wool's what I use, and it's brilliant. It's 99% recycled glass, and you can lay it and not get itchy. You still have to wear a mask. It's got particles, but you don't get itchy. It's basically recycled glass. Yeah, that's the one I use.
And look, sealing up your drafts, putting insulation in there, the two best things you can do if you're starting retrofitting any house.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I might talk to you after, Rhiannon and Andrew, about if you need some advice about energy efficiency. And I can't believe you're taking on another restoration.
You're right.
Very good. Okay, so
I think we've caught up with.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah, just with the insulation, like, yeah, it is. It's easily the best thing you can do. If that was the first thing we did here. Poke my head through the manhole, nothing. So it was a pretty easy decision. Straight into it. So
in my particular situation, I've got a 130-year-old cottage. And there's no thermal mass. You know, even the chimneys are built on the outside of the fabric. So the only thing to do is get as insulated as you can possibly get it. Put double glazing wherever I can get it. And it created a really snug little envelope. So I mean, we have the smallest canary you can buy. Because I'm a builder, I've always got timber off cut, so I basically just burn on my waste. Yeah, and that keeps us warm all winter. And along with edible landscaping outside to shade the house in summer, it's nice and cool in summer. So it can be done. You just got to use your brain and think about it a bit. That's all.
And I'd have to mention that Murray's house, when that was open a couple of years ago, his 140-year-old Rose Cottage, I think that was the most popular house we ever had people through. Murray was exhausted at the end of the day.
250 people through that day, I think.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
There's another one popped in about insulation around single brick veneer without removing the plaster.
Oh, it's really hard.
No, you inject it. You get a firm in from Melbourne called Envirotech, I think, and they come and inject the walls. Again, we had a weatherboard last year. Nicole's place, she had all her internal walls injected with insulation. Now she's snug.
Yeah, the only thing I'm worried about brick veneers doing that is you've got you'd have to make sure that there's no condensation gathering.
Right.
Gathering it within the wall for the I mean, that's why they have the little weep holes along the bottom, so condensation can get away without rotting away the fabric of the building inside. So if it's done properly, maybe, but yeah, I'd personally take the plaster off the walls and put the insulation in and just do it that way. But yeah, there's a lot of problems with the weep holes and making sure you get rid of that condensation inside the building. If they can guarantee that it can get away, yeah, fine.
No, very good point, Murray. Very good.
All right then. Well, we're pretty much at our end now, so we might start concluding if we don't have any other questions in the chat. So obviously it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for your time, those who've been speaking on our panel. You've given up your time, and we really do appreciate that. So hopefully, yeah, Rhiannon and Andrew, we've put the link to your venue in the chat there. Yeah, thanks everyone who's joined us as a participant as well as someone asking questions. We really do appreciate it. So this is being recorded. So if you know someone who'd benefit from hearing what we were talking about, and hearing, you know, whether it's the all electric journey, whether it's the having to pull the weatherboards off and all the insulation and things like that. So we'll have that available for people. So if you want to stick around, in 15 minutes, we'll be having our session on gardens. And that'll be our final session for the day. So thanks again to everyone. Really, really do appreciate it. And we'll be back in 15 minutes.
And just a little bit about the gardeners. Murray will stay on, but he eats out of his garden every day. Hardly buys any fruit or veggies, and it has some unusual plants. We have Rowan, who's growing pineapples, pawpaws, bananas, and everything, creating a microclimate in his backyard in North Bendigo. And we have Long Gully Community Garden. Have we got anyone else? We have Alyssa, who's a soil expert and a local landscape designer. So,
and Rowan, of course, with the tropical garden.
Yes.
Yes, very good. All right, awesome.
Thank you to our panelists for their time now.
We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me annoy you, videoing you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
No worries.
Thank you. Bye.